The Pyramid Scheme, Part 1 of 3. The general gets demoted, a rebuttal, refutation, and correction of the false teachings of Sara Suten Seti, Brother Polight, and Shakka Ahmose. To quote the great historian, scholar, and teacher, Dr. John Henry Clark, I only debate my equals. All others, I teach. This is a series that serves as a clinic on how to deconstruct weak and poorly sourced scholarship while also serving as an accurate account of true and factual historical events regarding the people who are generally misnomered as black people, who are accurately defined and described as Moors. Dr. Khaled knew he was a Moor. Contrary to popular belief, the word Moor does not mean black, but the word Moor, the modern day English term for the people who have been branded with the slave label black, first became cognate to the term black in late Greek. What is a cognate? A word that is related or connected to or has the same linguistic derivation as another or from the same original word or root. Based on my research, Moor and black are in fact false cognates, pairs of words in the same or different languages that are similar in the form and meaning but have different roots, that is, they appear to be, or are sometimes considered cognates when in fact they are unrelated. This can be verified examining both word origins, the etymology of the word. Moor implies indigenous African origins, while black can be traced to its Germanic roots. Germanic roots? So when you hear so-called scholars agree that they are black and they represent black African power or claim to be black and proud, they are agreeing with the so-called white supremacists that they are a slave and an animal, which I will prove forthcoming for the record. The Moors created the Spanish language from combining Arabic and Latin. A Moor's proper designation in Spanish is moreno, which means por el sol, from the sun, dark, swarthy, tanned, brown, etc., which is accurate and respectful. To make it plain, we called ourselves Moors, Morenos, Mari, Meri, Merau, Meru, Moab, Moabite, Almoravid, etc. And therefore they, the European, called us Moors or Moros, Morus, late Greek, which later became a synonym for Negro or black in the English language, later between the 16th and 17th century CE. Allow me to give you some definitions for Negro and examples of its use in context in the modern Spanish tongue through Spanish to English translations for you, the reader's full consideration. Negro, an adjective, black, color, awful, rotten, suerte, black, gloomy, porvenir, Yarvo, una tarde negra. I'm having a terrible afternoon. Parsales negras, to have a hard time. Verlo todo negro. Or to be pessimistic, furious, fuming, informal, furioso. Me pone negro. A que nunca me avisen de nada, it makes me mad that they never tell me anything. Masculine or feminine noun, black man, black woman, trabajar como un negro, informal, figurative, to work like a slave. Really? Negro? I could continue with this line of reasoning, but I think by now I have already made my point. In contrast, moreno, a Spanish term used to refer to individuals of dark skin tones, it is not considered offensive and is used as a term of endearment. In the context of speaking or writing, fallacies or fake and or deceptive arguments that prove nothing, fallacies superficially appear to be sound and have immense persuasive power, even after clearly being exposed as false. There are 53 types of these fallacies, and they are not always deliberate, but a good researcher will avoid such fallacious arguments at all costs. And a true scholar's purpose is always to identify and unmask fallacies in arguments. which I am doing right now. Sara Suten Seti claims that there were no Moors or Islam in Africa before the 7th century CE. This is a fallacy. Firstly, I would like to bring clarity to the true history of the classical antiquity of the Kingdom of Morocco, which cannot be understated. Inhabited by indigenous Berber or Moorish kingdoms since as far back as 2800 BCE, contemporary with the unification of Lower and Upper Egypt, Kemet, Egypt, the pre-dynastic and old kingdoms of Egypt, Remet, Kemet, Nu, Tameri, before the time of Djoser, Imhotep, or Sneferu. For some 2,000 years before the Phoenician colonization in the 8th century BCE, by the Carthaginians in the 5th century BCE, the Moors Berbers were there and considered by the so-called Egyptians to be the native populace. These Moors or Berbers, proven by the definition, according to one of the definitions of Moor, a Muslim of the mixed Berber and Arab people inhabiting northwest Africa. These Berbers are generally regarded to be ethnically indigenous to North Africa west of the Nile Valley. Now let's take a look at these two words, ethnicity and indigenous. Ethnicity, the fact or state of belonging to an ethnic or social group that has a common and distinctive culture, religion, language, national and or cultural traditions. Indigenous, originating or occurring naturally in a particular place. Native, synonyms, native, original, aboriginal, autochthonous, local, domestic, homegrown, earliest, and first. That's you, Moors. Now let us set the record straight by clearing up any misconceptions on what an Arab is. Arab is a cultural and linguistic term. It refers to those who speak Arabic as their first language. Arabs are united by culture and history. Arabs are not a race. They primarily inhabit Western Asia, North Africa, parts of the Horn of Africa, and other areas in the Arab world. Arabic groups which inhabit it or are adjacent to the Arabian Plate and Arabic-speaking people include the Lebanese, Syrians, Emiratis, Qartis, Saudis, Bahrainis, Kuwaitis, Iraqis, Omanis, Jordanians, Palestinians, Yemenis, Sudanese, Algerians, Moroccans, Tunisians, Libyans, Somalis, and Egyptians. Dr. Wesley Muhammad informs us through his exhaustive research that the tribe of Quraysh and the Banu Hashim, the prophet's kith and kin, were described as Aswad, a misnomer meaning black, Asmar or brown, generally described as Adam or dark colored, the pure Arabs, because the color of most of the Arabs was dark, al-Udma. The Arabs used to take pride in their dark brown complexion, and they had a distaste for the pale complexions, al-Umra wa al-Shakra. And they used to say that such was the complexion of the non-Arab. Now briefly, let me explain what is the Maghreb, or al-Maghreb. Known to Europeans as Barbary, usually defined as the region of Western North Africa or Northwest Africa, west of Egypt. The traditional definitions as being the region including the Atlas Mountains and the coastal plains of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Mali, Mauritania, and the disputed territory of the Western Sahara. The Maghreb's inhabitants, Maghrebis, are known as Moors. The Muslims' areas of Spain in those times were usually included in definitions of the Maghreb. Approximately 3500 BCE, a change in the Earth's tilt caused an accelerated desertification of the Sahara and natural barrier between the Maghreb and sub-Saharan Africa. The Maghreb, or Western North Africa, is believed to have been inhabited by Berbers at least since 10,000 BCE. Let's now look at the Negro Law of South Carolina during the times of slavery. Chapter 1. The Status of the Negro, His Rights and Disabilities. Section 4. The term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers, that's right, and their descendants. It does not embrace the free inhabitants of Africa, such as the Egyptians, Moors, or the Negro Asiatics, such as the Lascars. What is this really saying? We will approach this a little bit later. Chapter 47 of the Circle 7 Holy Quran, verse 6 states as follows: The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa, they were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren, who sojourned from the land of Canaan, seeking new homes. The Holy Quran, Circle 7. These Moors are historically distributed from the Atlantic Ocean to the Siwa oasis in Egypt, and from the Mediterranean Sea to the Niger River. Historically, they spoke Berber languages from the Afro-Asiatic and thus descend from the Proto-Afro-Asiatic language family, which form the Berber branch. Kushite, Egyptian, and Berber languages are all members of the Hamitic branch of the Hamito-Semitic linguistic family. It is still disputed which branches of Afro-Asiatics are most closely related to the Berber, but most linguists accept at least either Egyptian or Chadic is among the closest relatives within the family. However, one of the most widely spoken of Moorish ancient languages are spoken by the sub-Saharan Mosi people, the largest ethnic group of Burkina Faso, constituting more than 40% of the population. This language is known as More, Moba, or Moab. Sub-Saharan language called Moab. Oh, Moab, African people. Moba, African people. Moab is also spoken in Ghana as well, and is actually part of the Gur languages, belonging to the Niger-Congo language family, also classified as Senufu, or Senufic languages, spoken north of the Ivory Coast, the south of Mali, and the southwest of Burkina Faso. Pyramid text of Pepi I, 6th dynasty, 2300 BCE, the high priest Terneter of the temples of god Seth of the cities of the Anu peoples. Inscription on Terneter tile dating around 3100 BCE at temple of Abydos. Mor, Palermo Stele, the high priest of Anu. The Anu people, besides these types belonging to the north and east, there is an aboriginal race of the Anu, or Anu people, written with these pillars who become a part of the historical inhabitants. The subject ramifies too doubtfully if we include all singular pillar names, but looking for the Anu written with the three pillars, we find that they occupied southern Egypt and Nubia, and the name is also applied in Sinai and Libya. Petrie, The Making of Egypt, 1939, page 68. Here's that stela for you. Nobleman, Terneter, the devoted one to God. Here's the drawing depiction of that same glyph. The drawing of Terneter is commonly used by scholars and others who claim that the Nile civilization was started by extraterrestrials, but as we can see from the original that the notion is based on a poor drawing of the original stone carving. Here it is again. The original, that is. The Terneter tile is pre-dynastic, found by British Egyptologist W. M. Flinders Petrie in the early temple of Abydos underneath the dynastic temple. Anu, God, Mesopotamian sky god, one of the supreme deities known as the Sumerian and Anu and Akkadian. Anu belongs to the oldest generation of Mesopotamian gods and was originally the supreme deity of the Babylonian pantheon. Consequently, his major roles are as an authority figure, decision maker, and progenitor. In heaven, he allots functions to other gods and can increase their status at will. The stela of the Assyrian king Samsi Adad V from 815 BCE, making obeisance to the symbols of 5 deities, including top the horn crown of Anu. This just shows the link between Canaan and Kemet. The origin of the civilization of Egypt, Kem, was black African, specifically Ethiopian, or Anu. The history of black will remain suspended in air and cannot be written correctly until African historians dare connect it with the history of Egypt. This is by Wayne Chandler of Gods and Men, Egypt's Old Kingdom, 1989. Manetho, the last student of the ancient Egyptian mystery school of Anu at Alexandria before it was invaded by Alexander the Greek in 330 BCE, which places the beginning at 17,000 BCE and the short chronology 3100 BCE of the moderns, for the latter are obliged to admit that by 4245 BCE the Egyptians had already invented the calendar, which necessarily requires the passages of thousands of years. Sheikh Anta Diop, The African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality, originally published Nations Negres et Cultural, 1955. These Anu, or Ethiopians, were agricultural people, raising cattle on a large scale along the Nile, shutting themselves up in walled cities for defensive purposes. To this people we can attribute without fear or error the most ancient Egyptian books, the Book of the Dead and the text of the pyramids. Consequently, all the myths of religious teachings, I would add almost all the philosophical systems then known and still called Egyptian. They made the earliest attempts at writing, for the whole Egyptian tradition attributes this art to Thoth, the great Hermes, an Anu-like Osiris who is called Onion. In chapter 15 of the Book of the Dead and in the text of the pyramids, all those cities, Ant, Anu, Menti, Anti, Anit, Sini, today called Esne, Erment, Quak, and Heliopolis, have the characteristic symbol which served to denote the name Anu. The identity of the god An with Osiris has been demonstrated by Polight. We should indeed recall that Osiris is also surnamed by the Anu, Osiris Ani. The god Anu is represented alternatively by the symbol and the symbol are the Anak tribes now inhabiting the Upper Nile in Ethiopia, related to the ancient Anu. Future research will provide the answer to this question. Sheikh Anta Diop, Origin of the Ancient Egyptians, 1981. Here is a map of Mauritania. Mari, from which derives the English term Moors, was the Latin designation from the population of Mauritania, the part of Africa west of Numidia, corresponding roughly to the territory of modern Algeria and Morocco. Mari is recorded by Strabo, who wrote in the early 1st century as the native name, which was also adopted into Latin, which he cites the Greek name for the same people as Morusi. Numidia was an ancient Berber Moorish Algerian kingdom located in the region of North Africa in what is now northern Algeria and parts of Tunisia and Libya. From the 3rd to 1st centuries BCE, the country is bordered in the northeast by Tunisia, in the east by Libya, in the west by Morocco, in the southwest by Western Sahara, Mauritania, and Mali, in the southeast by Niger, and in the north by the Mediterranean Sea. Mauritania derives its name from the ancient Moorish kingdom of Mauritania, and ultimately from the Mari people. Mauritania was another sovereign Moorish Berber kingdom. It was situated on the Mediterranean coast of North Africa in modern western Algeria and northern Morocco. Here is just a map showing the DNA distribution of the Berber haplogroup. Here is an ancient map of what is now known as Africa, what was then termed as Libya, throughout the Nile Valley, showing Berber settlements throughout Africa. The ancient map is over 2,000 years old. It shows there was no Egypt, just a huge expanse of land known to classical geographers and historians as Libya. to the extent that the name Libya also came to designate the whole continent of Africa. When the Romans arrived through the western gates, Tripolitania, and Tunisia, they adopted the name Africa, or Africa, originally from the Berber name of the local tribes who inhabited the region, as in Yefren today, or after the Berber goddess Afri. There are many great ancestors that the title Africa could have originated. Some of these are the ancient Moorish king Malik Afriki, Pharaoh Khafre, the son of Khufu, and even the great ancestor deity Tairu Afrik of the ancient Saharan Zing Empire. Thereafter, Libya became known as Africa. This means that the names Libya and Africa are both Berber or Moorish in origin. Moor, noun, North African Berber, late 14th century from the Old French more, from medieval Latin morus, from Latin morus, inhabitant of Mauritania, Northwest Africa, a region now corresponding to northern Algeria and Morocco, from Greek moros, perhaps a native name or close cognate with moros, black. But this adjective only appears in late Greek and may as well be from the people's name as the reverse, which I have already demonstrated throughout this presentation. Being a dark people in relation to Europeans, their name in the Middle Ages was a synonym for Negro. Later, 16th to 17th century CE, used indiscriminately of Muslims, Persians, Arabs, etc., but especially those in India. Historical examples, general definition of Moor. The Muslims who invaded the Iberian Peninsula of Spain in 711 CE were mainly Berbers, Moor, and were led by a Moor, Berber, Tariq ibn Zayed, though under the suzerainty of the Arab Caliph of Damascus, Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, and his North African viceroy, Musa ibn Nusayr. Look at that flag. It's been around a long time, people. Before Africa was called such, it was called Libya, because the first and true recorded Libyans were in fact dark-skinned, woolly-haired Moors. Look at this map from 1,000 years ago, showing that Berbers have long been living up and down the Nile. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, or Periplus of the Red Sea, describes navigation and trading routes from Roman Egyptian ports and dates between the 1st and 3rd century CE. The map clearly shows that not only were Moors or Berbers in Africa prior to the rise of Islam in the 6th century CE, but that they were known even by the Europeans to live up and down the Nile. Here's a glyph referring to Canaan. Sudan, Punt, Arabia, the lands east of Tameri on both sides of the Red Sea, is the land known by the ancient Egyptian as Ta-Neter. Bud spells it Ta-Nu-Neter. In his Egyptian dictionary, Ta-Neter means land of the gods. It is important to note that scholars such as the great ancestor and beloved master teacher Dr. John Henry Clark and Dr. Wesley Muhammad are both quoted saying that Western Asia, the Levant, part of Africa, Afrabia, the Kushite Semites re-entered North Africa around 6000 BCE, forming an important constituent part of the historic Egyptian population. These Kushite Semites contributed to the language, art, and religion of historical Egypt, and may account for obvious mythological and iconographical debt that Egyptian civilization owes to Western Asia. Facts. According to Clapperton, the Benin people are descendants of the Yoruba tribes, the Yoruba tribes being descended from 6 brothers, all sons of one mother. Their names were Ikelu, Igba, Ijebu, Ife, Inbini, or Benin, and Yoruba, according to the late Sultan Bello, the Fula chief of Sokoto. At the time of Clapperton's visit to that city, the Yoruba tribes are descended from the children of Canaan, who were of the tribe of Nimrod. We will revisit that shortly. According to this, By Adija tradition, the Yoruba and the Hausa share a paternal grandfather. This is consistent with the claim made in Yoruban and Bagawan tradition. The grandfather is none other than Namudu or Lamarudu, who is shared not only by the Yoruban Borugu traditions, but by the Hausa as well. During the annual Gani festival in Dara, which according to Direk Lange is a royal reenactment of the Bahajida legend, the king is followed in procession by drummers who drum special beats signifying the words Lamarudu, son of Canaan. Writers like George G.M. James noted the specific relationship with the Egyptians and the Moabites, whom are the Moors, in his book Stolen Legacy. The very name Islam can be traced back to ancient Egypt, used in the same exact manner that Moorish American Muslims use Islam as a peace greeting because Islam means peace. Muslims, Hebrews, Kemites, and other groups of our people across party lines all greet each other in the name of peace, be it Islam, Shalom, Hotep, Selam, Salem, or Sharma. Ancient languages of our ancestors and etymological traces trumps conflation. Please reference the SLM root for further clarification. There it is. Sharm. To greet, to salute, to offer salutations, etc. Proto-Semitic languages, as reconstructed by linguists, which may have evolved as far back as 9000 BCE, included in its lexicon the name Allah. Example, Allah as the name of God. The word Allah appears at the top of the list of gods as the ancient gods of the father of all gods in the ruins of the Royal Library of Ibla, in the archaeological site of Tel Mardik in Syria, dated to 2300 BCE. The Akkadian Kushite evidence documents the name even earlier, to the pre-Sargonic period 2700 to 2600 BCE. It cannot then be said that Ra predates Allah, but rather in the reverse. As a student of the Medu Neter, I know that the R and the L sounds become interchangeable, as evidenced in what is known as the SLM root in Semitic and Afro-Asiatic tongues. Example, the Hebrew Shalom and the Kemetic Shalom. Indeed, Ra is undoubtedly an Egyptization of the Proto-Semitic Allah. A fellow of the craft of Amun-Ra, aka Allah, Sara Suten Seti, claims that we Moors have borrowed the Europeans' Masonic handshake. Handshakes historically were a way to determine whether one was friend or foe. In Moorish American literature, you will find the word unity under our symbol for unity. Many scholars agree that they trace handshakes to the 5th century Greece, but as we can see here, we have an 8th century BCE relief of a Canaanite king of Assyria shaking hands with his Babylonian brethren. The oldest recorded forms of handshakes were practiced by Babylonian kings circa 1800 BCE who took the hands of Marduk before assuming the throne. It is undoubtedly a tradition that was passed down by earlier Kushite rulers. Secret societies, fraternities, and sororities utilize secret handshakes and grips, allowing them to identify initiated brothers and sisters. Prophet Noble Drew Ali said that he was going to remove the veil off of all secret organizations, and his arrival marked the day that all light would be revealed. So here, Seti's claim that the Moorish Science Temple of America has borrowed the Masonic grip is hereby debunked. Here are 2 artifacts that are available openly, and notice that you see the word unity attached to the symbol of the handshake. Be sure to compare the grip displayed in MST of A literature and the Masonic grips displayed herein for further clarity into this outstanding error made by Seti. Seti, in one of his many poorly researched video presentations, also claims that in our one-on-ones, Quran questions for Moorish Americans, that Prophet Noble Drew Ali was not just an error on many of the questions and answers, but that its contents are promoting what he called a white supremacist ideology. As a scientist, you must test the presented hypothesis to see if it checks out, or if it is mistaken. This is Moorish science. Many will make claims without having enough information, either out of immaturity, laziness, lack of access to resources, while others are simply provocateurs or agents of mis- and disinformation, aiding and abetting the said white supremacists and their counterproductive agendas. So let's address Seti's next line of questioning and allegations. I find that Seti's favorite fallacy to use is known as the straw man, the fallacy of setting up a phony version of an opponent's argument and then proceeding to knock it down with a wave of the hand. He claims that the following questions are white supremacy lessons. In this argument, he also uses the logical fallacy known as name calling, a variety of the ad hominem argument, the dangerous fallacy that simply because of who they are, any and all arguments, disagreements, or objections against their standpoint or actions are automatically racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, bigoted, discriminatory, or hateful. So let's examine this closer. These questions and answers can be found in the Quran question for Moorish Americans. Number 1, question and answer number 87. What is meant by the word black? Black, according to science, means death. According to science and its pre-19th century predecessor, known as natural philosophy, the philosophical study of nature and the physical universe, and for the sake of historical relevancy, we will also see what Kemetic science, also known as alchemy or alchemy, teaches in reference to black meaning death. Asar, or Osiris, is one of Egypt's oldest gods and is known for his reign over the dead. As the god of the underworld, resurrection, and fertility, Osiris was usually depicted as being mummified, complete with the ceremonial beard, crown, flail, and crozier. His skin is generally green or black to represent the fact that he is dead. I hope y'all heard that. Here is a depiction of Osiris as green. The green color alludes to the vegetation, which covers the face of the earth and therefore represents the robe of nature. The black represents death and corruption and is being the way to a new life and generation. Except the man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. White, yellow, and red signify the three principal colors of the alchemical, hermetical, universal medicine after the blackness of its putrefaction is over. Putrefaction is one of the 7 stages of the decomposition of the body of a dead animal or human. It can be viewed in a broad term as decomposition of proteins in a process that results in the eventual breakdown of cohesion between tissues and the liquefaction of most organs. Under normal conditions, the intestinal bacteria in a corpse produce large amounts of foul-smelling gas that flows into the blood, vessels, and tissue. It is this gas that bloats the body, turns the skin from green to purple to black. This is known as necrosis, which is a stage of death. According to some sources, Negro and Necro share the same root. Here we have the great ancestor El-Hajj El-Malik Shabazz teaching on the science. Anubis was depicted in black, a color that symbolized both rebirth, alluding to the fertility of the Nile due to the decayed matter from which it is composed, and death referring to the discoloration of the corpse and those who have been mummified. Anubis was also known as the protector of graves and cemeteries. In alchemy, caput mortuum, alternately called nigredo or nigrido,
signified a useless substance left over from a chemical operation such as sublimation and the epitome of decline and decay. Alchemists represented this residue with a stylized human skull, a literal death's head. In alchemy is found again the perpetuation of the universal mystery, for as surely as Jesus died upon the cross, Hiram at the west gate of the temple, Orpheus on the banks of the river Hebros, Krishna on the banks of the Ganges, and Osiris in the coffin prepared by Typhon, so in alchemy, unless the elements of first die, the great work cannot be achieved. The stages of the alchemical process can be traced in the lives and activities of nearly all the world's saviors and teachers, and also among the mythologies of several nations. It is said in the Bible that except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. In alchemy, it is declared that without putrefaction, the great work cannot be accomplished. What is it that dies on the cross, is buried in the tomb of the mysteries, and that dies also in the retort and becomes black with putrefaction? Also, what is that does this same thing in the nature of man, that he may rise again phoenix-like from his own ashes? Caput mortuum. Let's dig even further into ancient Egypt, its alchemical sciences. The alchemy negredo, or blackness, means putrefaction or decomposition. The alchemists believed that as a first step in the pathway to the philosopher's stone, all alchemical ingredients had to be cleansed and cooked extensively to a uniform black matter. Necrosis, death, the stage of dying, the act of killing, a form of cell injury that results in the premature death of cells in living tissue by autolysis. What I have undoubtedly shown and proven is that according to science, black has several literal meanings, but it is clear that death plays a prominent role in many of its definitions. Kemet. Many teach and proudly share that it means the black land, mistakenly thinking that the black was a reference to the people, when in fact it was in reference to the rich and fertile black soil created from mineral-rich silt from the flooding of the Nile. Here are just a few examples from the Medu Neter. In the Egyptian dialect, Ta means land of, so the transliteration of these texts as we say it in English today literally means land of the Moors, Tameri. Or Tamarau. According to question number 87 in the original 101s, it is asked and answered, in all reality, what is a Negro? A Negro is a four-legged animal. Enlightened Truth, collected from the Bible and Ancient and Modern History by Robert Benjamin Lewis, pages 339 and 340, inform us that Negro is derived from the Latin term Niger, meaning black. Niger, a Latin word, was formerly used by the Moors, the old Romans, to designate any black inferior object. A plant, a marsh, flat, moist ground, bog, or animal. Question number 93. Will you define the word white? White means purity. Purity means God, and God means the ruler of the land. White in our lessons do not reference the European. In the Yoruba culture, which according to the oral tradition are descendants from Canaan, it becomes key to note that Obatala, creator of the human race, is the god of purity. He is also known as the white god, or the god of purity. The color white is a reference to the deity's divine nature, not the color of his skin. Another of Seti's claims debunked as fallacious and ridiculous. The preceding to the last question and answer that was ignored by Seti is 92. What title does Satan give himself? God. Why did Seti skip this? Because he knows that even if you had not done the research presented via the previous Quran questions, that this particular question shines light revealing the fallacy of his white supremacist allegations. Okay, just in case it is not blaringly obvious, let's review briefly. If white means God, and the prophet asks, what title does Satan give himself? And God is the answer? To quote the master teacher, Dr. Clark, you answer to such stupid words as Negro, colored, and black. You have no nationality. Negro, black, and colored are not a nationality. The Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey was quoted as saying the Negro wants a nationality equal to that of the French, the English, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Irish, etc. It was Prophet Noble Drew Ali who came and brought to us a nationality on this land for the first time since 1774, when we were stripped of our fezzes and turbans and branded with the slave labels of Negro, black, and colored. Here's a clipping from a trip that Noble Drew Ali took to visit Marcus Mosiah Garvey at the Atlanta Penitentiary in 1927. These are the Askaris. The Askaris are mercenaries, aka soldiers of fortune, typically warriors hired in the bush of Africa by the European colonists, i.e. Italian, British, Portuguese, Spanish, German, and Belgian, to brutalize their brothers and sisters, fought for anyone who had the resources to pay them. The Arabic word is a derivation from askar, meaning army, which in turn is from Persian laskar, words for a regular soldier. These Moors generally didn't claim to be Moors. During those times, the European armies all wore khakis and fezzes as their uniform. And so these warriors from various tribes throughout Africa were paid 2 to 3 times as much as European soldiers, wore the uniforms that the European gave them to wear. The Askari units served outside their colonies of origin in various parts of Africa, the Middle East, and in Asia. So I hope this answers the question that Seti brings up regarding the Askaris. He doesn't make mention of the Askaris, but he calls them Moors. All of our people are Moors. And in general, although most Askaris were not Islamic, there were some who were, as well as Christian and other religions and faiths.